everyone. Welcome to Time to Thrive. This is your host, Bethany Meadows, and our guest today is Vinnie Potestivo. He began his career as an MTV executive responsible for helping artists and celebrities claim their brand narratives in that original wave of unscripted television. He has worked with Ozzy Osbourne on the Osbournes, Jessica Simpson on the Newlyweds, and Ashton Kutcher on Punk, just to name a few. Today, he uses his Emmy Award-winning background as a media brand advisor, personal brand strategist, and content coach. As a trusted connector, Vinnie creates, develops, produces, distributes, amplifies, and helps to monetize some of the most talked about brands in modern pop culture. He has now launched a new podcast titled I Have a Podcast, where his guest lineup includes many of the same celebrities he has worked with in the past. We welcome Vinnie to Time to Thrive so that we might learn how to use personal branding and media to advance our business goals. Welcome to the show, Vinnie.
Yeah, thank you. I'm here. And the coolest part about the construct of the show is that the Time to Thrive, we have so much control over when and how and where our time to thrive is versus some of those names and projects you threw at me from 25 years ago where television networks had a lot more say and when someone could or couldn't thrive. And I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Yes, I'm so excited you're here as well. And I know we had to reschedule a few times just because you're one busy guy.
Hey, life gets you going on this journey. The funny thing about media, the nonlinear experience of journey is I couldn't imagine being here sooner. I've got literally exactly 100 guest episodes of experience now, versus maybe 30 or 20, maybe even just like 2 months ago. I'm doing some real research. I didn't even realize. I didn't realize in talking one-on-one to so many podcasters how much research I was doing, how different people are creating content, how different people are distributing it, amplifying it, aggregating it, syndicating it, or not doing any part of that. Just maybe they're just publishing it. And I didn't realize how many opportunities there were for growth and discovery without needing to make you be more visible or making you do more. And the more conscious we can be a part of that, I think the more rewards we'll get.
That's been, to me, the favorite thing, the all-time favorite thing for me in doing a podcast is meeting all these amazing people.
Yeah.
And not just connecting with them, an interview and then done, but, there's a relationship that begins when you interview somebody and you kind of digging into their life a little bit. You kind of have a little connection that happens. So that's been the thing for me in doing the podcast is just all these amazing people that have just now become part of my community.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think a lot of it is how you approached it, right? There's a way to get into podcasting that could be, how do I say, not as sustainable as an approach where you come to a community truly looking to make impact beyond the recording of the episode. And I think that, yes, it's awesome to meet people and be part of their projects. And it's awesome that they are the ones who create all of this content as a result of an hour or 30 minutes or 2 hours of time that we get to spend together. I have to be very clear. I've been in media a long time. I don't think there's ever been a point in time where guesting on a podcast has been more invaluable from the social proof, from the content, from the ability, just all of the content that is created and repurposing it, pre-purposing it, identifying it, sharing it, all that opportunity comes. And if we're not focused on the relationship, if we're not mindful of the responsibility of what comes as a result of that conversation, then I call attention to the responsibility piece. Networks have a big response, especially publicly traded companies, now that the law is making them be responsible. And also we, the people, want to be watching content from responsible platforms that are doing things beyond just taking our money from advertisers and our time, right, to watch content, that we want that level of inclusivity and action. And that's something that we can do one-on-one together now. It's powerful.
Yes. All right. So at the beginning of all our podcasts, we do something where we ask a very random question, but we let you choose the question by choosing a number between 1 and 5, and then you get a random question. So I got my cards here.
5.
Number 5. Okay. What is the main thing on your bucket list?
Oh, my bucket list. Oh gosh, I crossed that. I'm doing so many things, by the way, on that bucket list. It's so funny. There aren't many things that I feel called to do that I don't go out and do. I don't know how to say
That's a
that,
good
but
answer, really.
it's like I wish I had a longer bucket list. I think I'm going to get a longer bucket list. You know how I'm going to do it? By collaborating. I've always really been good at finding ways to experience something through someone else's goals or journey, whether it was my siblings or my family or even just as a casting person and producer in the Real Housewives or any of those shows that you mentioned earlier. There's something thrilling about successfully helping other people achieve goals, especially their bucket list, when I'm capable of making something happen. And I'm not saying I'm the only person capable of it. I know for a fact if I'm capable of doing it, other people are. If I learned it, or if I taught it to myself, or if I read in between the cracks and I'm not picking up on some, I now know. Maybe 20 years ago, I thought I was the only person who was picking up on those like psychic, global, universal energies. But I now really truly believe that other people are tapped into that. I know because it's proof in my career that over 25 years of creating content, being conscious of what happens after I create and being conscious of what happens before I create impacts all part of what you see. And what I mean by that is we can't create something on TV now. We can't create a movement, and we shouldn't be on podcasting. By the way, if we're talking about mental health, for example, I love telling people now 988. It's the new 911 for mental health. It's a brand new number that we, the people, wanted. We wanted an easy, quick, assurable way to connect with somebody in a mental health emergency. And we made that happen. It took years for us to get those 3 little letters, but there's a responsibility in talking about mental health that I like making sure people know to go to 988. And creative is a mental and physical artwork. It is form. It is muscle memory and emotion tied together. It is supposed to be exhausting and exhilarating and nourishing at the same time. And I doubt by the end of this conversation with you, Bethany, I doubt I'll be exhausted. I bet I'll have more energy, right?
Yeah.
This is something Maya Angelou says. Maya Angelou says, with creativity, the more you spend, the more you have. That's powerful when you think about the value of creativity versus the dollar. The more you spend, the more you better make
Yeah.
because the less you have. But yet on social media, for some reason, maybe even in podcasting, for some reason, we want the emotional reward and the fiscal reward at the same time, even though we know the ingredients we're creating them with are completely different materials, right? One is substantially more sustainable and additive to the conversation, and one is limited and scarce. And yet we, on this modern world of creative, whether it's podcasting or digital series or social, we want to be making money and we want to be creating audiences at the same time. I'm here to tell you that it can happen. They're just not going to happen in the same path, the same place. And more likely than not, if you're set up to get paid from one source and distribution from another source, more likely than not, you have more control over the message, more control over the audience. And that's important.
One of the things that I really get a lot of fulfillment out of as the owner of a full service marketing agency is having an idea that solves a problem for one of our clients and then implementing that idea, seeing it to fruition and watch it become successful. That must have been a very similar experience for you being at MTV in those early days of something, they were pioneering something really new, this, celebrity reality kind of show.
Yeah.
Which I loved, by the way. I was a fan.
Thank you. Thank you for getting me through it.
So what was that like?
And by the way, it's all your fault. It's not my fault. I just made it. You're the ones that watched it. And the advertisers aren't spending money on networks trying to get my attention.
I'm sorry, but Jessica Simpson walking through Lowe's was just, that was.
Could you relate? Right? Could you relate?
Yeah.
That was the beauty of that was a fun show because she suddenly, as a young female who's scrutinized in media, found herself in a relationship and now in a role where the society yet again was telling a woman yet again what she's supposed to or not supposed to be doing. And she's like, it's not me. I'm not this version. And what MTV did was give her 30 minutes to show the world who she was at a point in time where most music videos were 3 to 5 minutes long. So that's really all artists got, were 3 to 5 minutes to get an energy out there, unless they came out with a song and then they can go on a late night talk show.
Right.
And that ability to create your own space. I mean, I saw it with Ashton. I saw it with, like you mentioned, that Sharon. They didn't just come into MTV. They created the space for thousands of other shows and then dozens of other networks, and then ultimately hundreds of networks, and now bazillions of platforms, and the media scape, right, is exploding in front of us. But it's not exploding in a vacuum. It's exploding with all of those pieces being part of the alchemy of its growth. So the Osbournes and a family narrative, a celebrity narrative, the Punked, which is a procedural, and it shows some, procedurals, and it shows a process. Newlyweds, which is, a closed-ended conversation about the beginning and the ending of the newlywed process, right? Like, it's kind of like Friends on TV. Friends was about 20-somethings at the point in time where your friends are your family. And the sad part about that, and I can say this as a New Yorker, is in your 30s or in your late 20s, people start getting married, they have families, they have their own families, they reconnect with their families, and that friend paradigm shifts and it changes. And the creators of Friends talk about this. This is how they knew the show would end, and how it was going to end, because that's what friendships in your 20s, where your friends are your chosen families, that's what they look like when you have that ability to do that. Until you start letting in, plugging in the new people in your life that are going to take you to the next level.
I think one of the reasons why those shows were so successful and really resonated with people, because they felt genuine. It didn't feel like Simpson just felt very, she was who she was, and she just kind of put it out there. I mean, she was a little ditzy. She was like, her trying to fry chicken, and about burning the place down.
Oh yeah. Chicken tuna of the sea.
Tuna of the sea, or her going camping, or the Osbournes and the way they had their little family spats and things like that. It nailed it in the sense that a brand has to be real. It has to be genuine. Otherwise, people will call it for what it is. BS, right?
They want transparency. The audience wants transparency. The participants crave authenticity. And now we think the audience craves authenticity, but I think the audience craves us to be authentic and the recording to be transparent. They don't want the show to be authentic. They want the show to be transparent. They want the people who are in it to have done the work, to show up, to not sit here and say, I'm going to XYZ, and then in the next scene, they're nowhere to be seen. This is actually something that when you're casting housewives, like Andy and the executives will ask me, they say, Vin, she said this. Is she going to do it? Is she really going to go and do that? Is she going to stand behind her? Like, everything she's saying, we agree with, but is she going to do it? And sometimes, people say things that they think that they want, you want them to hear, and, or they say things in ways that, they'll tell me a story about something that happened, and they'll tell it in a way where they're so over it that they're not even upset that it happened anymore. They're angry, and they're actually laughing during the story. And I'm like, but you brought, like, this is like a pretty, because of the tone of voice. I'm like, your story is not getting across. Your message is not getting across the audience. Most of the people watching us right now on television aren't watching us. They hear it. And then when they hear something interesting, they turn back in and they look at it, and they might even need to rewind 10 seconds to see what they missed. I don't know about you. I watch TV that way, so I don't want to overgeneralize. But
we, as an agency, we work on dozens of brands every year for companies, small businesses, organizations, nonprofits. We have worked with one personality over the years, but I was curious for you to share how you saw the difference between creating the brand process for a company versus a brand process for a person.
A person. It depends on if the company identifies as being a founder-led business or a founder-led company. So founder-led companies, you might see them on QVC. They're all in Sephora.
Yeah,
Peter
yeah.
Thomas Roth. Like I can identify, Dr. Stern. I can identify who the person is that created the ingredients or the set list. So let's say it this way: personal brands and founder-led companies are very similar to me. By the way. It starts with a thought. That thought has to be in action. I don't let the action dictate the thought. I make sure the thought dictates the action, meaning we're sitting down and we're talking about what we're consciously going to be doing, and then we support it with action. And then in that action comes how are we going to support that with press or podcasts or news or social. And I start to figure out how, with this top line idea, how we're going to help you cut through the clutter. For example, both personal brands and founder-led businesses might find it interesting that in media, there is an obsession with the relationship between mother and daughter, specifically. It always has been. Kelly and first off, it's Kris Jenner and the daughters. It's Kelly and her mother. I can go on and on and on about TV shows. Yes, there are dynamics. There are sons and there are sister-brother dynamics and father. But on television, it's the mother-daughter relationship that really stands out and thrives. I can say this in certainly on all the housewife shows where you see the mom coming in, usually as some type of matriarch of the family, especially on cooking shows where matriarchs of the family have say. So this understanding that we find value in the relationship between mother and daughter, even on MTV, what is it, 16 and Pregnant? Like that's really a show about the relationship between mother and daughter and the situations that they're in and how they both approach it. I think two reasons why. One, because television, I'm taught from television that the female viewer controls the remote control. It's something that they will say in the room. They'll say the female viewer controls the remote control on Bravo, for example. And 15 years ago, maybe, your husband would come in and see that it was on. He would maybe leave the room. 5 years ago, when he came in and saw that it was on, now he sits down because Bravo figured out that if the woman is going to, if a wife is going to watch the show, and I'm talking about like just statistically, if a woman is watching a show, that someone from a different interest group comes and sits down, what we need to do is make sure there's something for them. And what you'll see in the Housewives is that the media figured that out. So now there is like a bonus scene sometimes where the husbands are playing, smoking cigars, or there's like a husband sort of moment looking in on the wives. And that construct is because the audience is doing the same thing. It's about being aware of it. So understanding that these certain types of relationships play well. How does that work for skincare, for example? It works in skincare because you might say, I'm deeply discounting this product, or I made this product in volume. I'm giving you 2 liters of this serum because my mom asked me for it. And if it was good enough for my mom, then I knew it was good enough for us. And I certainly wanted it after my mom asked me for it. And I can use that as a leverage point, as a human to human leverage point, to say how I came up with a product or why I'm able to substantiate it. And the QVC audience loves it. I'll say that. There's a lot of clients that I've used that relationship to explain the value in creating something larger, and only if it's true and accurate. Usually, and it always is accurate and true, but like sometimes you have to ask mom, like, what, get them involved in the process too. That's that's where the real magic happens, is if you understand the relationship between mother and daughter, how that parlays in media. It's just a really important, critical relationship to think of. You might now be conscious of that when you're scripting your next commercial for your next product, or if you have a guest, you might ask questions now themed on the relationship that are built on that. And depending on how your product or service helps those women in that dynamic, can really make a huge difference.
You've worked with a lot of different celebrities and transforming their careers, and the hardest bio to write is your own.
So
right?
True. It's so true.
And so you know, it when your brand is yourself, you need someone to help you figure out what that narrative looks like, not to create something that's not you,
Yeah.
to understand you and help you see how to go from here to where you want to be. Can you give us an example of where, where you took a celebrity from, point A to point Z, so to speak?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. A good one is Ashley Simpson. This is Jessica's sister. I remember when Jessica's sister, she'd been a background dancer in Jessica's videos, and she was on oh gosh, I forget the name of the show. It was one of those, like, not One Tree Hill, but it was one of those destination shows for the young youth audience. And she was doing really well, in and of her own right, but she was ready to write music. And it came at a time after Newlyweds where we started getting pitched by lots of labels. Oh, this artist has a show. Everyone's got a show now. But the story had passed on most of those artists. Most of what we were looking for had already happened. They were coming to us when the product was ready to go to market, and we were like, but we missed that moment. With Ashley, I was able to see first off, to be in the room when conversations like this go down. Well, if she has a show, then we'll give her a label deal. Well, if she has a label deal, then we'll give her a show. Okay, well, we'll give her a show, but the label has nothing to do with the show. But if you greenlight, the album, we will cover it. We can't promise, even, by the way, that we can air it, because there's so many shows that I've shot in its entirety that didn't end up airing on television. I shot a whole Newlyweds series with Nas and Khalees, 10 episodes, and it never aired. So, like, sometimes you shoot stuff and it doesn't go. So you have to be mindful, of that part where you can actually get through the gate. But with Ashley, it was cool. With Ashley, I saw the making of, she was an artist before I got to work with her, and I got to see her tap into this music part of her where she had more number one. Jessica has giant hits and is a huge recording artist. Ashley had more certified number one hits hit the chart than her sister did. Ashley's a really strong writer. Jessica's a really strong singer and performer, and they both have their skill set, and this is the difference.
Oh, they're very different.
Very different, right? Yeah. And then I bring this up because this is how the story ended, on at least at MTV. And then I was there when Ashley was very young and inexperienced, and people empowered her to make a lot of decisions. And she had a live television moment on SNL where the wrong track was played, and she didn't know how to recover from it. She kind of did like a farm hop and got real uncomfortable and awkward.
I remember it.
They cut to commercial, and we never came back. She didn't get a second chance. And that message that it sends, it's very unfortunate. And again, I think it's not fair, because I think because she was a young woman in media, that the repercussions were a lot more severe and strict. But everyone pulled away. The advertisers pulled away. Audience pulled away. It made it difficult for additional seasons at MTV to happen. So ultimately, that show didn't end up, moving forward. And it was a real lesson in knowing when to ask for help, knowing when to be in control, knowing why certain people have control over the situation when you don't, even if you have authority, and final say, why it's sometimes great to lean on the people who've been in the room before you, so that these things, these trip ups, these mess ups that are inevitable, but could be curtailed, and you could be protected from them out of the gate. This is why I'm passionate about people stop talking about repurposing content. Why are you surprised after your podcast episode that you have to advertise it or amplify it? This is not new news to you. I can't submit a TV show to MTV and not give 4 or 5 different 30-second and 15-second commercial spots to promote my episode. That's part of my deliverable to the network. So one thing I like to throw out there is pre-purpose. If you can visualize where you have to advertise your content, you will be more mindful about what you're creating and more mindful about the piece of content that you use to advertise. You'll actually start putting it into the podcast itself. I think something that you described to me already something that you do. You have these great segments and these great things that can live alone, but they can also support each other brilliantly in this audio experience,
Right.
which makes it easy. It must be so easy for you and your team to go in and say, okay, because Vinny, he's a long talker. So just go get the answer. And then this is the clip that goes on TikTok. And this is the clip that goes on LinkedIn. And the rest of the story about MTV, it goes someplace, but it's not going to go on LinkedIn because that's going to confuse them to lose. And having that clarity, what you've done already, pre-purposing, you've pre-identified where you want these pieces to go. It helps you create with the level of clarity and vigor and intention that I think, and inspiration that I think most creators don't get to approach their content creating if they're not mindful of where it's going and how they're going to use it to amplify it.
Right, right. Another way that you use or advise, business owners or celebrities is to work through, award programs. And I actually this year was nominated and won for top 50 over 50 in Alabama.
Yeah, congrats.
Which immediately gives away your age that I'm still adjusting to being in my what is some key things that business owners need to understand when it comes to award programs and how to use these as a marketing strategy?
Yeah. For me, I try to focus on not winning the award, but how I would leverage it. So out of the gate, I don't want an Emmy. I want to leverage the Emmy. I wanted an Emmy so that I can tell people I'm an Emmy Award-winning TV producer with 25 years, history. And I just won my first Emmy last year. I want people to know that the success of that Emmy, which sounds like it's exciting and the pinnacle of everything, came 25 years after me doing hard work. And it came from this room, my guest room that I'm recording, my guest office that I'm recording my podcast in right now, not from being out in the field and, sitting in housewives' floors and all the places that I've been to shoot content. It's powerful to me how much awards can elevate the conversation. Awards, you want an always on, strategy about presence and discoverability. Awards are a great way to annualize your podcast, your brand, your personality, your personal brand. They're a great way to annualize it. So congratulations on your award this year. Are you excited to win again next year?
Well, it's a one and done kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you get to wait till 60 and we'll just wait till let's just wait for that. We don't have to no save the date for that one.
I was like wedged between an astronaut and Mother Teresa of some sort. It was kind of like had a little imposter syndrome going, but
yeah, isn't that funny how imposter syndrome sneaks in? The more experience we have, suddenly imposter syndrome sneaks in. It wasn't until I was 40 that I experienced imposter syndrome for the first time. And I was like,
well, when we're young, we're arrogant, we know everything.
Yeah.
Or we know we don't know.
Absolutely right.
I also say about imposter syndrome, if you don't have it, you've probably been sitting in your comfort zone a little too long and it's time to push.
Yeah.
Time to grow.
I agree with you on that. If you don't think you're the underdog, well, yeah, everyone, that's the fun part about underdogs is that everyone's an underdog until they're not. That's fun. I like that part about being the underdog.
Well, there's very few people on top. You've always got to chase, right?
Yep, that's true.
And that actually goes into my next question for you. The marketplace being as crowded as it is, we're in huge competition for attention. Like if you put something out on social media, you're competing with lots of noise.
Oh yeah.
How can we make our pitch, story, narrative, all of that stand out from all of that?
Oh, that's a great question. It's funny. Here's the New Yorker in me. I want to start with like an anecdote. I think that I can meet more people if I stood still on 45th and Broadway and waited for people to come by me than if I were to try to run around New York with a clipboard and meet people. I actually think that if I want to stand out in this world and day of discoverability and visibility, consistency matters, and the room that I'm in matters. And when I'm not in that room, the lack of my presence in that room should matter also. So I try to be here's my twofold sort of strategy on standing out. One, I'm constantly seeking small ponds. I know I'm like it could be a medium-sized fish, and in a small pond, I will certainly stand out more. My small pond right now is Good Pods. I love goodpods.com. podcast.com. It's a social media network meets a podcast player. I can see every single person who's ever listened to my podcast through Good Pods, and I can connect with them. There's visibility. I actually have the ability to connect with them. And then if you come see my podcast, you'll see a large conversation about each of my episodes. And you can't see that anywhere else on any other podcast platform that's out there. Only Good Pods is uniquely doing this. There's only a couple of thousand people on Good Pods, so I'm lucky right now. I've been number one in TV and film. I've been number one in careers. I've been number one in business and in entrepreneurship. I'm not number 200 in anything on Apple Podcasts or, in terms of visibility of my podcast. So I take those number one spots from TV and film and careers and business from Good Pods. And that number one data is what's on my one sheet for me as a brand, that when I'm talking to sponsors, I'm able to say, look, I'm a growing podcast in the podcast space. I've got this many speaking appearances coming up. I'll be at Podfest, which will be a great moment for us to connect. Maybe I throw that out there because maybe as a brand, you might want to come into Podfest through me. And maybe in my panel, I can talk about you and we can talk about cooperation now that I have something in the future to leverage, access point to leverage. And it's putting all of those pieces together that help you stand out. But I needed that moment, I needed that moment for me where I felt like I can show that I can cut through the clutter. And I just needed to find a smaller place where I could actually do that. So I go out and I love being on new platforms so I can stand out. Number one part of my strategy is that. Number two, I like being first. I was at MTV. You've said the word first a couple of times. That first is my thing. Like if you want Vinny, you want to cast a show? I've already cast a show, but you'll be the first. Yes.
I like the word pioneer.
I appreciate that. But
being on a horse and just like galloping through the plains and being first to wherever I'm going.
But pioneers often don't get paid to lead the way. I got paid to lead the way. So my boss, Rod Asa, a pioneer, he was paid to do his job. But as an empath and as a creator, he sat down with Sharon Osbourne and came up with this construct of like reality, the real world with the Osbournes. I think that's ultimately what the pitch was when we started recording some tape. That level, he's pioneer. Me, I was hired, to be honest, to do it. I feel, like the canary. All the risk was not on me. I was paid. So I literally had limited risk. I think now I can be, I'm not quick to call myself a pioneer, but I'm quick to be with the pioneers in podcasting. And I can actually, I'll say this because there's some ego that you're seeing me confront right now. I don't know if you're supposed to call yourself a pioneer, but I'll call myself a pioneer if I can be with other pioneers. That I couldn't be happier and prouder to be. For that reason, would I do that? That's the same reason why I wanted to be an award winner. I didn't want to be an award winner so I can win an award. I wanted to be amongst the award winners.
Yeah. The
1% have awards. Why? Because every year they need to find a way to stand out, reinvent. So they're not going to keep reinventing the personal brand and changing who they are. But now they've got this award and we got them for the year. And then maybe they'll come out with an album next year. And then maybe they'll come out with a documentary and all these fascinating ways that we can hold on to people where they're niching down the product, not the person. And that helps with the experience. So that's the power in winning awards, to be really honest. And I've done some real hard research, about 150 awards worthy of winning that I've got on my website at vpe.tv. So if you're looking to qualify for free awards, many of them you have to pay for consideration. And then some of them you have to pay for your awards after you win, versus like the Emmys. The Emmys, you pay a larger amount of money for your potential consideration, but the trophy comes with it, versus your W3s or Telly awards and communicator awards, where it's like a couple of $100 to get in. And then if you win, you can purchase the trophy and some of those other places. And then the other thing I'm going to say about awards, we know Grammys, Emmys, Oscars, those awards where people are they're pit against each other. Like one winner comes out from the category. I love the Tellys and the W3 awards and the communicator awards. They don't pit us against each other. It's me against myself. They say, here's the category. These are the 5 things, the 5 criteria we're judging this podcast on, and you'll get a score. And if the score is above 70%, you rank here. If it's in the top 1% here, and so on and so forth. I like those awards that are more community focused. And then some people will say, yeah, but are they real? And then I'll say, I don't know. But Disney and GQ and National Geographic and CBS and NBC and CNN and Fox News, every single platform is winning them. So real or not, who cares? It's what you do with it. That sort of matters. How you're leveraging that win, to change lives, to change laws, to change get representation in rooms that, it's what you do with that award that matters. And also awards, those awards are ways people find you without knowing who you are. I want award-winning lawyers. I don't know any, but I'm going to go look and I'll find the lawyers that are the best speakers in podcasting. They're not podcasters that have legal background. They're lawyers who are thriving in the podcast world. That's someone, if I was a local news booker, if I'm looking for local news talent, that's exactly how I would go find that next wave of talent, the next wave of real people, authentic, transparent experts, like we talked about earlier, that we know the audience is craving. That's where I'll find them.
Well, and people with a passion to share what they know to help other people.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the people I'm most attracted to.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I get like goosebumps, right? Like just goosebumps. Because it's like, it's not even watching them do what they do. It's watching us soak it in. It's the aha moment when your best friend gets it, or your mom or when you get it, and you're like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
all along. It's like you're Dorothy. I had these were my ruby slippers all along, and I could have done this all the time.
Well, as we start winding down, can you share something that you learned early in your career that is still impacting you today?
Oh yeah. Mandy Moore taught me the power of showing up for myself. It's hard. It's hard to show up for myself sometimes. It's so much easier to sit in the audience of someone else who I've claimed as being great, who I put value on, who I love being around. And it took me a long time for me to sit into that seat and realize that I was worthy of my own audience. And Mandy really taught me that. She's not just on time. We always joke. She's always early. And I'm like, but don't you have like a lot of stuff to do? And she's like, not when this is the thing I want to do. This is what I want to do. I'm getting like 15 minutes for me to get into that space to get ready. And there's a part of me that was like, bada bing, bada boom, gotta bop at this room, like a little bit of a hyper connector. And in hyper connection is where I realize, like, I'm not in my own audience. If I'm not in my own audience, I realized I'm not listening to myself. That's something powerful that I now get using her advice to showing up for myself, and what I'm doing now in podcasting. It's not just being there when I need it. It's being there when I don't. And that's where a lot of the active listening for me happens.
So how can people find you? Where can they find you? Where can they learn about you, connect with you? I know you're
reach out. First off, the way they can reach, if they really want my information, please come to Time to Thrive podcast. Look in the show notes. And before you even think of reaching out to me, let this be the podcast episode that gets you the 5-star review. That you could be like, yo, Bethany and Vinny, this was like such great information that I had to be part of it. I will be leaving you a 5-star review. So hopefully I will see lots of faces in there around this time as well when we launch. I also believe that what we are creating today is growing in the space that is actively growing. My address today will change, but the best way to reach me is vpe.tv, or on LinkedIn, reach out and say hi. Certainly someone that you want in your corner, before it's time to make the decision, so I can help understand the best way to get you through those opportunities. And if there's any way I can help you stand out, be successful as a creator, win awards, get more distribution, the power of aggregation, right? We're talking about the creator economy now. I think the future is the editor economy, the curator economy. So how to get your content seen, how to get it cherry picked by the people who are soon going to be controlling what the masses are looking at. This is a big part of our responsibility for us to create content that we own and we know how to use it. And I'm here every step along the way to do that.
And you are one of those genuine people who are looking to help others. And I appreciate that about you. And I appreciate you being here on the show, Vinny.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate lots of appreciation, by the way. I really, I don't take that lightly. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with it. And I step into this role of helping people become powerful creators, as I have my entire life, by the way, because we need it. Because I needed it as a kid, I needed it in my 20s, and we need it now as people. We need it. We need the collaborations between people are going to be what saves all of this. If we leave it to business and we leave it to tactics and we leave it to results and transactions, I just don't feel like that in my gut is the way to build the strongest, healthiest ecosystem for us all to thrive in. Some of us will thrive in a system like that, but I don't want some of us to. That was television. I think that we can all be healthier creators if there's a lot more cooperation.
Well said, Vinnie. Thank you so much.